Broadcasting and TV 16. To have your events announced, send your entries at least 3 weeks in advance to Church Spotlight, P.O. Box 1616, Greenville, South Carolina 29602. All entries are subject to availability.
And you need to take out a pen and paper and take some notes tonight, because we are in for a science lesson this evening. We're going to be talking about creation and just a lot of things, and debunking some of the myths of evolution. It's going to be an awesome time, and you don't want to miss a second. My guest tonight is Mr. David Rives. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
No stranger to Channel 16. We air your show. We're going to get back with you, and the minute long or so. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God.
Absolutely.
And man, people love those things. they really do. I love them, you know. But it's been a while since you've been here. What you been up to? You've got a lot going on.
A lot, yeah. I've been filming another set of programs for Creation in the 21st Century.
Be looking for those soon, folks. They're going to be getting on here.
And we've got a brand new set out there as well. We've got a little bit more of a sciencey tech feel and some exciting guests with some breaking information. So we've been doing all of that, plus I'm trying to get an event center ready to go so that we can bring people down when they get to the Nashville area, bring them in and actually let scientists present, do presentations and conferences, and let people come in, churches and people in the community come in and learn from that.
Right. This is an area that a lot of Christians can struggle with. They can accept that Christ died on the cross for them and He rose again. They can accept that, God created the earth in 6 days and rested on the seventh. But they have a hard time struggling with the age of the earth. And we're going to be talking about that some tonight. And I actually was one of those people, and actually was sitting at NRB, which we both attend, and I was sitting through a seminar Ken Ham was doing. And he said pretty much the same thing I just said. You accept this and you accept that, and why can't you accept that the world is only this amount of years old? And I'm like, okay, that's all it took, really, But when you have mainstream science against you saying that, the earth is billions of years old and it's cooling and the universe is expanding at this rate and it's because of this, and then they pull out their mathematics and it goes right over my head.
Well, and they try really hard.
They do.
But Dr. Werner von Braun, he basically sent men to the moon. Brilliant fella. He said, sure, a lot of people look at science and religion as antagonists. They just go against the grain. He says they're not. They're like sisters. While science tries to better understand the creation we see around us, religion tries to better understand the Creator who made those things. So there's really no debate except that there's this common perception in the scientific community that everything is millions and billions of years old.
Right. And you do both. Of course, your father, Richard, is digging in the ground. Help me out here.
Archaeology.
Archaeology, gosh. And you do a lot with astronomy, and they go hand in hand, don't they?
They do. Opposite ends of the spectrum. One's digging underneath the ground, looking at history, and we find that the Bible history is accurate from beginning to end, including what we read in Genesis. Well, then you go out into space and we see, just like Psalm 19 tells us, the heavens declare the glory of God, and it's beautiful and it's spectacular. And then, you look around us on the earth and you see all of this design, and then you look at us, the human body and biology and all the animals, and then you say, wow, look at the complexity that's there.
Yeah.
Then you look at the microscopic world and you see these patterns that mimic some of the patterns out in the grandeur of space.
Right.
And it's like, so it doesn't matter where you look, up in the heavens, underneath the earth through archaeology, or around us, or through a microscope, it's all proclaiming God's glory.
Exactly. You know, I think that the biggest myth out there is, you know, the scientists will say, we are created from nothing. It's just out of nothing. And I'll tell you what, if one little single cell organism came out of nothing, that would be remarkable. That would be unfathomable. And now they're trying to convince us that the millions and billions of organisms and cells and things out there that they know about, which isn't probably, you know, what fill in the blank of percentages, that's unknown, that we came from nothing. That requires more faith than believing in God. I'll tell you that.
It does. In fact, I'm working on a new DVD documentary called "Lot of Faith." Why you should believe in creation and not evolution.
Yeah.
Because the whole idea that everything happened randomly takes a lot of faith. It's a belief, and then you start to look at the actual definition of religion. And so I'll admit, yes, I have faith that what the Bible says is true. But you look at the definition of religion, and that is something that is believed by faith and held to with ardor. It's a belief system held to very strongly by faith. Well, let's just think about this for a second. If we look out in the cosmos and we take an atheistic assumption of a Big Bang, that is that 14 billion years ago, all of the matter in the universe went bang, it rapidly expanded and created the universe as it went. That's a novel idea, but it's not science, because it's not repeatable, it's not observable. It is a belief held to by faith, and is held to in the scientific community with ardor. They hold to it strongly. That means that belief in the Big Bang is religion, not science.
I like it. Well, that's true. It is, I mean, you cannot use the scientific method for observing, like you said, they observed the Big Bang. They're trying to do it, I guess, with the Hadron Colliders and stuff, but good luck trying to do what God did, you know.
Absolutely. And now they're looking at the God particle, you know, with the Large Hadron Collider and all of these other things. They say, well, we found the God particle. Now, of course, the technical name is the Higgs boson. And so when you look in the subatomic world, of course, we've identified a lot of stuff in the atomic world, but in the subatomic world, it's hard to see. You can't observe those directly. So things like bosons and leptons and all of that, you can't directly observe them. Then you see some effects and you say, oh wow, we found the boson that creates matter. So that's the God particle. We don't need God anymore. But then you start to research it and you realize that most of the people talking about this don't even realize the physics behind it, because yes, this tiny little particle does actually tell the matter what it's going to be, but it doesn't create matter. If you look at Einstein, Einstein says that matter can be neither created nor destroyed. In fact, it's a law that energy cannot be created nor destroyed. So where did all the matter in the universe come from? Because I mean, that desk is made out of matter. We're made out of matter. Everything in the universe, you get all this matter, and yet it's a law, a scientific law, that matter doesn't come from nothing.
Right. What I think about these scientists, and I'm far from scientists, I'm far from your level, but I think that the natural science cannot be used to prove or disprove a supernatural God. You can't mix the two. And the only way you're going to understand a supernatural God is for us to step out of the natural and into the realm of the supernatural. And that's where our Holy Spirit comes in here on earth. And then when we're transformed, boom, we're supernatural. We'll hopefully understand everything then, and that'll be pretty awesome. So,
it will.
You know, but the scientific method will not work on disproving or proving God, for that matter.
No.
So, but anyway, well, how did you get started in this? Of course, your father, you grew up around him digging in the ground.
I did.
And he was there when they found I tell everybody this. He found Noah's Ark, and you know, and I mean, just a fascinating story. I had your father on a couple of years ago. It's probably on YouTube. So if you want to see that, Google that or look that up on YouTube. But so you grew up in that, but then you looked up and you saw stars and you wanted to learn about those.
Absolutely.
Tell us how you got interested in all this.
I've always been interested in history and science, but it was really sort of towards the end of high school there that I got interested in astronomy, and it was a hobby, you know. When I was much younger, I saw the comet Hale-Bopp.
Right.
And I said, wow, that's neat. Well, years later, I started to get into astronomy again, and the telescopes got a little bit bigger. The technology got better. And so I'd seen the moon and I'd seen some planets, but I decided to try to tackle astrophotography, photos of space.
Right.
And the first time that I took a picture through the telescope, and all of this detail came out. These beautiful colors and shapes and all of this of galaxies and nebula and dust clouds throughout the universe. I said, wow, this reminds me of Psalm 19:1. The heavens really do declare God's glory. And so at that point, I got to thinking about it, and it was just sort of this thing that clicked. How could I use this for something more than a hobby? How could I use this to glorify the Creator and to give God the glory? And so at that point, I began to speak in some local churches in the Tennessee area and talk about some of the pictures I'd taken, talk about some of the problems with atheistic cosmology and how it couldn't have happened by chance. And then that sort of grew. Over the next few years, I wrote a book, and Dr. Danny Faulkner, who's actually in town right now at this science conference, he wrote the foreword to it. And so I began to study astronomy a lot. And the more I studied, the more I learned that it all lines up with what the Bible tells us. So that sort of led to a chain of events where a documentary that we produced was one of the semifinalists at the largest Christian film festival in the world.
Oh, cool.
A few years back.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty spectacular. I got to go to the awards ceremony and all of that.
That's awesome.
And while I was there, I met another producer who asked me to host a documentary on hummingbirds. And I'd love to tell you a little bit about hummingbirds in a second, if we could get back to that. But so I did. I hosted this documentary on hummingbirds. Right after that, I got an offer. TBN called up basically and said, "Would you like to have your own TV show and host it?" You know, and it was an incredible opportunity.
Definitely.
So I began to do more research, make more documentaries, and write more books, and it's been an amazing opportunity because I've got to travel the world, sharing what I know, doing research, going to different countries, and I couldn't be more blessed. Yeah. Every day is a new adventure.
It's awesome, man. And real quick, you mentioned a lot of your books and DVDs. We have a lot of them laid out here. We're going to be talking about. Give the folks a website real quick where they could go on there, find out more about you. We only got like an hour and a half, so we're going to barely scratch the surface. But they definitely need to subscribe to your Facebook and YouTube channels and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, well, you can go to davidrives.com, davidrives.com. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter, e-newsletter, so it's an email, but also check out our Facebook and our YouTube because we've got hundreds of videos on YouTube, and on Facebook we have an active community of people sharing, you know, nature pictures and creation type new scientific discoveries and inspirational quotes, and so we love to connect on Facebook.
Excellent. Yeah, and the videos, as you've seen a lot of them on here on Channel 16, they're short, they're sweet, they're funny, they're informative, you know. And in fact, just yesterday I was telling you, I got one of your emails, and you got a new documentary coming out, Monkeys Don't Cry. And I love that. I love that. I didn't even have to think about it. I knew what it was about. It was funny. It's going to be informative. So, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. But let's talk about the hummingbirds, because this is something I guess a couple of months ago it came out, or I was reading about it on your site. So let's talk about the hummingbirds.
Yeah, this is basically when I went to that film festival, I brought a stack of promo DVDs because I said, hey, you know, maybe I need to give somebody something. But it was a big stack, and so I stuck them in my suitcase. So I went to this film festival out in San Antonio, Texas, and on the last day of the festival, right after the awards ceremony, I got to thinking, I'm like, you know, that stack of DVDs is still in my suitcase. I don't want to take that back on the flight. You know, they're going to charge me extra or something. So I went and I grabbed that stack of DVDs, and I began walking through the festival. I said, would you like a free DVD? Would you like a DVD? I was just sticking them in people's hands, you know. Months pass, and all of a sudden I get a call, and it was a producer who said, David, you don't know me from Adam, but you stuck a DVD in my hand at the film festival a few months back. He said, I didn't watch it for months, but when I finally got around to it, I got to the very end of it where your phone number was there, and I looked at your area code, and I said, it's the same area code. We're neighbors. You know, here we were way out in Texas, and yet we're neighbors in Tennessee. He said, can I take you to lunch? And I said, sure. So we go to lunch, and he slaps down a 3-page outline. And he said, David, I'm making a DVD, a documentary feature length with an original soundtrack. All of this is going to be spectacular on hummingbirds. Would you host and narrate it? And I thought about it for a minute. I said, you know, this is, I really appreciate the opportunity. And I'm thinking this through. Hummingbirds are small and they can hover. But you say you want to make a feature-length DVD, a documentary about that. What else is there to say? And he said, oh, I think you're going to find that there's more to it than that. Well, boy, is there more to it than that. So I'm just going to run through a couple of facts with you. Hummingbirds, they are small. They're the smallest warm-blooded creatures, the smallest birds on Earth. They, at birth, weigh less than a Post-it note. If you stuck a Post-it note on your palm. That's right.
Wow.
Fully grown, average, your ruby-throated hummingbird, it's like setting a nickel in your hand.
Wow.
That light. Because they have this hollow bone structure that enables them to be light enough to hover. Okay? So that alone is spectacular. But these birds can fly up to 35 miles per hour. They can fly forwards, backwards, side to side, and hover. And they're able to maneuver between tree branches very quickly at incredible speeds.
They got to have some good eyesight.
They do.
Wow.
Because they have two fovea. Okay, so you and I, we look straight ahead.
Fovea?
We have one.
I don't know what a fovea is.
We have one. I can see you in focus right now.
Okay.
But my peripheral vision is all blurry, right? Everybody's. Well, if we were to look over here, okay, this is in focus and now you're blurry. They have two fovea in each eye, two focus points, so they can see straight ahead and side to side simultaneously. Wow. So they can fly and maneuver and do all of these acrobatics. Amazing creatures. Now, they have a heartbeat of around 1,200 beats per minute.
Oh, that's nothing. Mine's 1,400. Come on now. You got to do better than that to impress me. Gosh, 1,200 beats a minute?
If ours is a few hundred beats, we better be headed to the emergency room right now.
Wow.
Okay, so they flap their wings at 80 times a second. And to capture that, you know, this film right here is 30 frames a second.
Yeah, we're 30 frames a second.
So if you slow it down, if you get something 900 frames a second, that's the only way you're going to capture their 80 times per second wing beat, and it's in a figure 8 pattern so that they can hover. So their wing is actually making a figure 8 pattern.
If it was just up and down, they would just go up.
They would just go up. So they have to somehow keep themselves balanced perfectly, and so they use their tail feathers and they use this figure 8 pattern to keep 1,200 beats per minute. Now, they fly from flower to flower collecting the nectar. And they can tell just by tasting the nectar in that flower what the sugar content is.
Unreal.
If it's not at least 10% sugar content, they move on to the next flower because they know instinctively, I don't know how they do it, but they know that anything less than 10% sugar won't give them enough energy to sustain their metabolism with that fast heart rate. All right, now there's a huge problem for evolution. Because when these birds settle down on a long, cold night, they don't have enough energy to sustain them through the night. So they would simply die. Well, there goes the hummingbird.
Wow.
He's not alive the next day. They have to continually fly from flower to flower and get that energy from the nectar. All right, what do? They don't die because we still see hummingbirds. Well, they have a miracle system called torpor that kicks in on a long, cold night. And torpor shuts their metabolism down to 1/15 of their normal rate.
Wow.
And it slows their heart rate, now get ready for this, from 1,200 beats per minute to 35.
Are you kidding? 35?
And the next morning.
Oh my goodness. What would that be? Oh my goodness.
I mean, think of that ratio there.
Yeah.
The next morning, they wake right back up. They fire that heart rate back up
And
at
boom.
1,200 beats per second, and they're off like a rocket.
Wow.
Now, that did not happen by chance.
No.
There's no way. If these things had to evolve over millions of years, well, how do they evolve that miracle system that gets them through the very first long night?
Yeah, they would be extinct.
So,
it's just, wow.
Hummingbirds, I mean, you can't get much tinier than that, and yet the tiniest bird on Earth is so sophisticated we can't even imagine.
Yeah.
That's just a glimpse.
Yeah, that's just what we know about
Exactly.
it. I mean, and of course, I'm sure there's more that I don't know. But that's just one bird. There's how many species? Millions of birds.
Yep.
I mean, and that's just birds. Take it at mammals, at reptiles, you fill in the blank,
You fill in the blank,
It's unreal.
and you see that there is this design code instilled in each different type of animal, distinct kinds of animals, and it had to have been put there from the beginning by a creator, a designer, I believe the God of the Bible, of course. But it had to be there from the beginning, and the design code lets the animal do exactly what it's supposed to do extremely well.
Wow.
It didn't happen by chance.
And here's the kicker. He did it in 6 24-hour days.
That's right.
And he did it by just speaking.
By the word of his mouth.
Unreal.
He spoke and the heavens were created. He spoke and everything stood fast.
Yeah.
I mean, when you think about the power, an all-powerful God speaking things into existence in only 6 days, it didn't take him millions of years. People say, well, he could have used millions of years if he wanted to, and he absolutely could have.
Could have, yeah.
But the Bible makes it perfectly clear. It says that in 6 days, you flip to the 10 Commandments. And on the 4th commandment, it gives a reason why we're supposed to rest. It says, in 6 days, not 6 million years, not 6 billion years, in 6 days, God created the heaven and the earth, the sea, and all that in them is. And then he rested the 7th day. And so when you bring it back around to that and you realize he could have done anything. He could have created in 6 seconds, 6 million years, 6 billion years. But he said 6 days, and he did it in 6 days.
Well, and here's the thing, David. We think 6 days, that's crazy. Well, here's what's crazy. Before that first day, there was no time.
That's right.
So he created time. The very thing we based our life on in that 6 days.
Okay. So
crazy.
that actually is the first concept in my new little booklet here.
Awesome.
Because if we look at the first verse of the Bible, it says, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Well, if you distill that down, you think about it, is there scientific wisdom in the Bible? Well, you look at that verse and you say, in the beginning, God's outside of time. In the beginning is when he created time for us to live in. He didn't need time. He created it for us so that we could comprehend things.
Yeah.
Okay, so in the beginning, God created the heaven, there's space, and the earth, there's matter.
Right.
So in the very first verse of the Bible, you say, oh, the Bible's just a collection of fairy tales written by ancient, peoples long ago. In the first verse of the Bible, you've got the creation of space, time, and matter. The 3 basic components of the entire universe.
Exactly.
Now, you back that back up and you say, well, what about the Big Bang? Big Bang cosmology, 14 billion years ago, everything magically creates itself. It actually gives a theory on how time and space, on how time and space could be formed through this Big Bang thing. But it never mentions how the matter got there.
Exactly.
So it says, okay, well, maybe here's how 2 of those could be created. It never has a solution for how the third, the matter that makes up the universe.
Because you can't have 3 without 2 of them.
That's right. You have to have everything all at once, and the Bible gives the solution. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, time, space, and matter.
That's awesome. That is awesome. So, well, let's talk about the beginning, because shortly after in the Bible, we hear about a flood.
Yes.
And a lot of things happened. A lot of people don't believe in the flood. I believe in the flood. I believe it was a worldwide, global phenomenon. It just wasn't local to their area. What happened during the flood? Did we lose, like you've got dinosaurs here?
Yes.
Did we lose a lot of species of animals? Because we're told that 2 of everything got on the boat.
Okay.
So what happened?
That's a good question, and I get that question a lot because we don't see things like dinosaurs roaming the earth today.
Right.
Well, the Bible tells us that the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and God said, well, I'm going to destroy the earth with a flood.
Which, let's think about that for a second, because this is what's neat. So imagine how horrible the world had to be. I mean, we think it's bad now.
Right.
God hadn't destroyed us, right? Not today, you know, not of the date of this taping. We are still here. The earth is still here. There's not fire and brimstone raining down on us. So just imagine how bad it had to be.
It had to have been horrific.
Wow. But anyway.
And he's looking around and he says, but Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. So God said, well, here's this family down here. Noah found grace. And so there's grace all the way back there, stepping into the picture, and he's saying, well, I've got to preserve mankind, and I'm going to do it through Noah and his family. So 8 people got on board the ark. A lot of animals got on board the ark. We're talking about several representatives of each kind of animal. That would include dinosaurs. Dinosaurs did actually go onto the ark. Dinosaurs people think of them as these mysterious creatures. They're extinct, so they must have died out millions of years ago. But dinosaurs are nothing more than, basically, the word dinosaur means terrible lizard. They're big lizards.
That's funny.
Okay, so we have seen animals in the recent past, the dodo bird and other things, go extinct.
Exactly.
We see things go extinct all the time.
We almost saw the North American buffalo, the bison, go extinct.
That's
not
right.
long ago. Yeah.
That's right. They were hunted almost to extinction.
Yeah.
Well, they were hunted to extinction. It's a possibility that some of the dinosaurs were hunted, and that could have culled the numbers. But here's the thing. Okay, so the dinosaurs went on Noah's Ark. After the flood, the conditions were much different. Number one, you didn't have as much vegetation. Everything was wiped out. It had to start fresh. You had a lot of different conditions. So most of these big, giant creatures, the dinosaurs, didn't make it for more than a few years past the flood.
Right.
You still have mammoths and things like that, which are just overgrown elephants, long past the flood, for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years past the flood. But dinosaurs, most of them went extinct around the time of the flood. When they came off, they just couldn't survive.
Yeah.
But we do find their fossils, their skeletons in the rock layers.
Yeah.
We do actually have some of those fossils with us today. So this right here, Dante, I'm going to let you hold that, all right?
Now this is trillions of years old. Right?
There you go. So be careful because it's extremely valuable. That is a mosasaur tooth. Okay, so if you saw the Jurassic World movie, the new Jurassic World movie, the big sea creature that jumps out of the water, and we won't spoil it for people, but that giant 60-foot-long sea creature, that's one of his teeth.
You'd think his teeth would be bigger. Did he have like hundreds of these things? Okay, so it's like little razor blades in there instead of big, instead of like a sledgehammer.
And he did have some that were larger than that, but he had hundreds of them all in an array. And so that's just one of his teeth. Now, I've been in paleontological digs in Kansas and Colorado, places like that. And actually, I've found portions of mosasaurs.
Wow.
Portions of the skulls of some of those creatures, teeth out of different types of creatures. But one of the things that's so rare is they're in the middle of far western Kansas. You know, we're talking 1,000 miles from the nearest ocean, 2,500 feet, I believe it is, above sea level, way above sea level. You find sea creatures, okay? Sea creatures now in the middle of dry Kansas. Mosasaurs, thousands, tens of thousands of clams. And I was blown away when I first stepped foot on these fields, the Niobrara Formation, this paleontological research area. I was stepping on fragments of thousands of clams.
Wow.
I mean, some of them were over a foot in diameter. And these clams are turned to stone. They're petrified. They're fossilized. All right? Now, some of them are fossilized in the closed position. This particular one is turned to stone. This is a rock, and it's fossilized in the closed position.
Wow.
Now, if you walk along a seashore today and you pick up a seashell, well, it's going to be half of one of these. It's going to be, you're not going to find it in the closed position. That's because when one of these creatures die, they open up.
Right.
That's what happens. And then if they float around in the water for a few hours or a day or something, well, the muscles disintegrate and it breaks into two halves, and then that's the reason you find the halves. Well, turns out if you bury these things under enough mud before they have a chance to escape, and you kill them off in the mud, well, it'll turn them to stone clothes because they don't have time to open up. Right? They can't. They're stuck in the mud.
Wow.
But these creatures are known to burrow themselves out of mud. So you say, well, why didn't they just come out of the mud? You bury them in mud, they come out and survive and live to fight another day. Well, they've done experiments, and the particular types of clams that you find in the closed position, well, they can work their way out of 8 feet of mud.
Wow.
8 feet of mud buried on top of these things, and they can still work their way out before they die.
Wow.
Well, that means that these things were buried under more than 8 feet of mud very suddenly, very quickly, before they were able to escape. And it killed them, and it turned them into stone for us to find.
Wow.
How does that happen? Yeah, I'll let you take a look at that.
That is gorgeous.
How does it happen? And that one's been polished. Normally you find them in a more rough state.
Right.
The only way that can happen is if massive amounts of mud was forced over these things very quickly, and it buried them preserved in that state. I can think of one such event.
I can only think of one, but it couldn't be because science tells us it's not true. Come on, David. That would be the flood.
It would be the flood.
It would be the flood.
The Bible says the fountains of the great deep were broken open. And so all this water and sediment and mud was stirring around and washing over. Now here's the thing. It washed over in sheets. Okay? So as the flood waters were swishing back and forth, it was laying down one layer of mud and then another layer and then another layer. Well, you go out to the rock cuts right down the road. You go out to the rock cuts in Tennessee where I'm from. You go out to the Grand Canyon. What are you going to see? You're going to see layer after layer after layer of mud, of stone. It's lithified mud because it's sedimentary stone. Sedimentary means that it was laid down by water.
Wow.
So it's water-lane mud and sediment that is lithified. It's turned to stone.
Yeah.
Now, some of those layers, most of the layers actually, have no erosion in between the layers. All right, so if those layers took millions of years to form, well then it sits around for a million years, there's a creek running through it and it washes out a gully, and so the layer is going to do this. You go to the Grand Canyon, you go just down the road, you see these smooth, straight layers. Okay?
Yeah.
So they were laid down quickly, one on top of the other, before there was time for any erosion. All right, well, let's take it one step further. There are some times when you find these layers without erosion marks. They're all together, smooth layers, but they're bent, smoothly bent. Okay? So you see these smooth bends, almost sometimes where the rock layers will double back on themselves.
Oh, wow.
Up in Canada and a few places down in this area, and then in Germany and other places. How does that happen? Okay, so evolutionary geologists would say, well, David, all you got to do is you bury it about a mile underground, you give it enough heat and pressure, and it'll curl those rocks up. Well, you bury something a mile under the ground, and it's not going to be sedimentary anymore. It's going to be volcanic in nature. It's going to turn into something entirely different. It won't be layers anymore. So you can't have it that way. If we were to look at a piece of plywood, and plywood is basically layers of wood glued together, laminated together, right? That's a piece of plywood, several pieces of wood layered and glued together, turned into one solid piece, just like the rock layers turned into one solid rock.
Right.
Let's give it really slow, a lot of time and a little bit of pressure, and just see what we can do here. Just very slowly.
It didn't curl up on itself.
It didn't curl up.
Man.
It snapped, it fractured.
Right.
Now, this is an experiment that we can repeat. We can do it again and again.
Now, I thought it was going to curl up that time. I mean,
We can observe it with our own eyes.
Right.
We can repeat it. We can do this thousands, millions of times. I guarantee you're going to get the same result every time. It's going to snap.
It'll be once that it curls up. Come on. Come on. That's awesome.
So,
Wow.
that's real science.
Yeah.
And it shows us that you actually can't have these smooth bends in rock layers slowly over time.
Mm-hmm.
How do you get them? Well, you bend it while the rocks are still pliable, while it's still mud layers.
Right. That makes
So
sense.
what that means is that at the time of the flood, shortly thereafter and during the flood, when all these layers were beginning to form, well, pressure was building up in certain areas. That's where we get some of the mountain ranges. And it would have forced these pliable mud layers into these shapes. And then those shapes would have sat there until they turned to stone. They would have lithified over a few hundred or thousand years. So 4,000 years ago, we had a flood, and it formed all of these rock layers. And it buried creatures like those clams, but it also buried
this is neat, folks. If you cannot keep up, or you refuse to keep up, rather, and you're saying, well, this is all hogwash with the scientists, wait till you hear what he's about to explain now. This is unreal. And you're not the only one I've heard this from.
Yep.
This is from the scientific community.
Yes.
This is from evolutionists. This is from creationists. This is knowledge at this point. This is truth. This is not something you're coming up with to blow my mind.
Oh, no.
You know,
No.
This is real.
This is real.
Yeah.
And this came originally from the atheistic scientific community. They didn't want to believe in a flood. They didn't want to believe in God. They were just looking for dinosaurs out in the field, a paleontological dig. They found a T-Rex bone. Now, this is a copy. This is not the real thing. They're very valuable. They found a T-Rex femur bone. This is a T-Rex toe bone. A big toe bone, of course. But the femur bone is actually, it's massive. So we could lay down beside it and see just how big that thing would have been. All right, so it's the leg bone. They said, well, we're going to take it out of the field. We're going to get this leg bone out of the field, bring it back to the lab. Well, they tried to get it, and it was too heavy. It turned to rock. It's so big, and it was turned to rock, they couldn't get it. So they said, listen, we've got the solution. All right, remember, secular paleontologists, they said, we figured this out. We're going to carefully cut it in half. We'll take one half of the leg bone back, and then the other half of the leg bone back, and once we get it into the lab, we'll put it back together real careful. They said, that'll work. Well, when they cut the leg bone in half, in 2005, Dr. Mary Schweitzer and her team of paleontologists cut the leg bone in half, and they found soft tissue.
That's unreal.
Proteins, blood vessels, osteocytes, soft, stretchy material that shouldn't be there if that dinosaur died out 65 plus million years ago.
Well, when you told me about this before the show, I told you that makes sense because 65 million years from now, I'm going to look just like this. I'm telling you. But no, that won't happen. It can't. Nope. That's just, science can't prove that it can, and they can't. It's just unreal.
It is unreal.
Yeah.
Well, it caused the secular world to actually rethink things. In fact, Mary Schweitzer, Dr. Mary Schweitzer, she said, this is causing us to actually say, well, either soft tissue can be preserved for millions of years, or these things aren't as old as we think they are.
Right.
But they must be as old as we think they are. So we must find some way to preserve soft tissue over millions of years. So they started to do experiments and tests. They took ostrich bones and cartilage and all of this, and they tried to decay it over about a 2-year period of time. So rapid decay, and then say, well, let's extrapolate into the future and figure out if it was well preserved enough to make it millions of years. So they did all of this finagling, and they came back and they said, well, we're convinced that these things just must be the ages that we've been told, 65 plus million years old. So there must have been a lot of iron present in the blood of these bones, and somehow the iron preserved the soft tissue. And so they came up with a rescuing device called iron preservation, which it really doesn't work. You can have all the iron in the world, it's still not going to preserve these soft materials for millions of years. Only a few thousand years.
Wow.
Well, a few thousand years is what we would expect if these dinosaurs died out in a catastrophic worldwide flood.
Exactly.
I've dug up the bones of some of those big creatures. And then recently, some of my friends who I'm meeting with this week, they formed a research project. They said, well, if other paleontologists can do this, why don't we as creationists, as Bible believers, let's look at the historical account, let's say, well, here's what we would expect to find, more soft tissue if this is true, and go out and look for it. So they went out and looked for it. And they found a Triceratops horn. So the Triceratops is the big...
Is that what this is?
Yeah, that's what that is right there.
Get a picture of that. That's a Triceratops.
Check that out. You see that huge horn, the brow horn on it? It had 3 horns on it. Well, they found one of the horns.
Wow.
And they dug it up. They brought it back to the lab, and it had soft tissue in it as well.
Unreal.
Horns are not as durable as bone.
Oh, really? Okay.
So they decay much more rapidly.
Well, now, was the Triceratops like, I guess the rhino, where it's made of like hairs and like your fingernail, basically?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So those types of proteins shouldn't last more than a few thousand years under optimal conditions.
Wow.
And this thing was found just about a foot underneath the ground.
Okay. Yeah.
So it had been exposed to freezing weather.
Exactly. It's
extreme
exposed to the
heat.
elements. Yeah.
It had cracked. It was horrible conditions. And yet you still find soft tissue, which tells us that these things just aren't as old as we've been told.
Right.
So this brand new research was turned into a documentary which I was asked to host called Echoes of the Jurassic.
That's this right here.
And so we've all heard of the Jurassic. We've all heard of these dinosaurs and these giant creatures that lived long ago. And they did live long ago, but by long ago I mean thousands of years. And the evidence of those creatures is still seen in the fossil record, in the flood layers laid down by water.
Well, at least I can say, in all honesty, they lived at the beginning of time.
That's exactly right.
So they lived at the beginning of time. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Well, I know, and I don't want to even tell you how I know this, but I know that bodies or animals, they can become fossilized in a relatively short time.
Yes.
I was reading about, I got into a Wild West thing with Wild Bill Hickok.
Oh, yeah.
And they, for some reason, exhumed his body shortly after he died. I don't know, maybe 50, 60 years or something. And his body had calcified, and it was about 400 pounds or something at that point. And you're talking, this was in less than 100 years, way less than 100 years. I forget now why they did that. But anyway, so that's proof that those fossils, they could fossilize relatively quickly.
Oh, yes.
But that tissue, we know, cannot survive. I mean, that's unbelievable that it survived a couple of thousand years.
I know.
But millions of years, forget about it.
It's implausible.
Yeah.
It is. As you talk about things like Wild Bill Hickok and all of that, they buried him underneath mounds of dirt, right? These creatures were buried underneath mounds of dirt.
Yeah.
The average conditions, if a Triceratops or your cow out in a field dies, well, it sits there for a few days. Scavengers come in, the vultures start to pick it apart, the bones get scattered and missing, and then they start to decay, and they never get buried, so they never turn to stone. So one of the key ingredients for turning something into a fossil is to bury it quickly. It can't sit around. And so people trying to say millions of years passed while these creatures went into extinction. Well, millions of years of a bone sitting there is not going to turn it into a rock like we find.
Wow.
It's just going to sit there.
Wow.
So even that is proof of the biblical flood.
This is awesome. Folks, I hope you're enjoying this as much as I am, because this is just neat stuff to me. So, well, what else did you bring? That's
This right here is a chunk of a polystrate fossilized tree. Okay, this is actually a stigmaria, what they call a root section of a fossilized tree. And you can see the little dimples in it. These dimples right here are where rootlets would come out of it and they would grasp the soil. Okay.
So the reason it's fossilized because it was a root naturally under the ground.
Yes.
If it was a part of the tree, God, that thing's heavy.
It's heavy. It's turned to stone.
So if it was a tree, it would just sit on the earth and decay.
It would.
Yeah.
But that's part of an even larger tree that was found on an old coal mining operation when they were blasting away a cliff face. They blasted away a 25-foot tall cliff face, and in that cliff, in between all of these layers of stone, was a tree standing upright, and it was a big one, a giant, what they call lepidodendron. It's typically a lepidiflora type tree, which is similar to our club mosses of today. Now, club mosses, small. But these were pre-flood. They grew much larger. 20-foot tall, giant tree, turned to stone, standing upright through multiple layers of strata.
Like it was buried there.
Like it was buried there.
Yeah.
Okay, so you ask a secular geologist, tell me about the rock layers, because there's hundreds of rock layers that you can see in that cliff face. They'll say, David, that's no problem. You see, this one right here was laid down over about 100,000 years. This is about 1 million or 2 years. This is another 2 million years. You look at it around 10 million years there on that cliff face. And then you show them the tree.
Well, it was a really old tree, David. Come on.
You say, how did that tree stand upright for 10 million years while dirt slowly formed around the base of it and turned it into stone?
Wow.
And at that point, now I'll tell you what their answer is. They say, oh no, in this particular instance, you were right, David. This was a local flood.
A local flood.
Yet that right there was found on the Tennessee-Kentucky border. They're found in Nova Scotia. They're found in Germany. They're found all over the world.
Well, when they say local, they mean localized to this planet, David.
Yeah, there you go.
Not Tennessee, to the planet.
It was a planetary localized flood that covered the whole planet.
When you think of, anyway.
But see, okay, so again, I mentioned a bit earlier, I have faith that what I read in this book is absolutely true from beginning to end. But it's not a blind faith because the evidence is all around us.
Exactly.
And so that's what inspired the title of my most recent book. There used to be Bible Knows Best. There used to be an old series called Father Knows Best. And I believe that the Bible is the inspired Word of God, inspired by the Father Himself.
Exactly.
So if the Father knows best, then by implication, the Bible knows best. And if you break that down, knowledge, when I say knows best, knowledge actually comes from the word scientia, which means to have knowledge. So science is a study of the natural world, and science is knowledge. So when I say the Bible knows best, I'm saying that that the Bible is very scientific. Not that it's a science textbook, but that everywhere it speaks on science, it is always 100% accurate.
Exactly.
Whereas we, as mere human beings, we think of these theories. And we say, okay, how do you explain how that got there by random chance? Well, let's just give it a few billion years. Well, we have to adjust our theories because we find out they don't work. So we say, okay, well, maybe it took a few billion years, but it came about because of this lithifying into this and this doing this and that. And then, oh no, that can't work. So we have to adjust our theories again. Man's theories, scientific theories, always change.
Right.
The Word of God doesn't.
Exactly. You go back a couple hundred years, and modern day science has debunked what they thought was law then.
Oh yeah.
And just think of a couple hundred years from now, what we're talking about. Well, maybe science will say, you know what, that David guy, he was onto something. He was onto something. But
well, you mentioned that, and just a few hundred years you go back, and I'm going to give you one example. Okay. In Leviticus 17, we read a verse, sounds pretty generic. It says, the life of all flesh is the blood thereof. Okay? So I was reading that verse, and I said, the Bible knows best. So that must be scientifically accurate. And the more I thought about it, I said, certain creatures don't have blood. But no, I must be missing something, because the Bible says the life of all flesh is the blood thereof, and it must be accurate. What am I missing? Some creatures don't have blood. And then I realized The key operative word there is the life of all flesh is the blood thereof.
Yeah.
So yes, there are some creatures that don't have blood, but the creatures that don't have blood, like sea sponges, don't have flesh.
Wow.
They have an entirely different consistency.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's 100% accurate to say that the life of all flesh is the blood thereof. Let's track that back into history, to colonial times. Let's just go back a few hundred years. Bloodletting was a common practice.
Right.
All right, so our bodies, your body right now contains approximately 160 ounces of blood. Now that sounds like a trivial fact. Okay, yeah, I'm pulling that out, sounds great. What does that have to do with anything? 160 ounces of blood. Well, it's estimated that in the hours just before George Washington died, they had the doctor come in and remove 125 ounces of blood out of his body. They removed almost all of his blood, and he died, and they wondered why. Yet, we read thousands of years before that, the life of all flesh is the blood. Don't take out the blood.
They killed the president.
So when you say just a few hundred years ago, science was, well, let's take out the blood. A few thousand years ago, God says the life is in the blood.
It's in the blood.
Take care of the blood.
Yeah. Wow.
So the Bible knows best.
It knows best, man. Well, let's shift gears from the dirt, and we're going to look up.
Yes.
And so to give you guys a heads up, we are not live right now. This is what, July 25th, 26th? July 26th. We were taping this. So for us now, August 21st is coming. This may, I can't remember the air date of this. The eclipse may have already happened, or it could be in a very short, couple of days. I cannot remember. Let's talk about that, because that's got to be like, you got to be going bananas right now.
Oh my God, you don't know how excited I am right now. I'm already planning an escape route in case it's cloudy, and I've got everything all in the works, and it's actually going to pass straight through the Nashville area.
The Nashville and then down through here.
I know.
And like our area, like between here and Nashville, is like one of the longest eclipses too. It's like like a minute 46 seconds here or something like that. So one of the longest eclipses of the eclipse route. So,
okay, so of course that happens when the Earth, Sun, and Moon all align, and the Moon blocks out the light from the Sun. Let's think about this for a second. All right, let's talk about the Moon. We've got an incredible Earth. Our Earth is so unique out of all of the other planets, completely unique. We've got a unique atmosphere. We could talk all about that. But the Moon is a quarter of the size of the Earth. It's the largest moon proportionally of all the other moons in the solar system.
I didn't know that. Neat.
So it's special. Somehow it has something special. And while other planets like Saturn might have, over 50 moons,
Saturn's huge.
It's huge. We have one moon, one giant moon. Okay, our moon, it helps regulate the waters of the ocean, to regulate those warm and cool waters, to stir it up, creates the tides. It helps maintain the stability of Earth's axis. It does all sorts of things, but it's around 240,000 miles, on average, somewhere in that region from Earth. Okay. The Sun is 93 million miles from Earth.
Wow.
The Moon is a lot closer, but it's a lot smaller. The Sun is a lot farther away, but it's a lot larger.
Yeah.
Okay, so it just so happens, and I'm going to say this is one of those happens things. Tell me if this is coincidence, that the Moon is 400 times smaller, but 400 times closer.
Wow.
So that during a solar eclipse, what we see is the Moon almost perfectly covers the Sun. But when I say almost, what I mean is it still allows this tiny, tiny, tiny bit of the corona of the Sun to be visible. And it's one of the only times during these rare solar eclipses that we can study with telescopes and visualize the corona of the Sun and some of these features on the solar atmosphere, because normally the Sun's too bright to observe those subtle features. And so it gives us this unique opportunity to study and observe.
Wow.
Okay, Romans 1:20 tells us that the invisible things from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made. so that we're without excuse, that there is a God out there. Well, we're without excuse. How are we to say that it's an accident that we happen to live on the perfect planet with just the right atmosphere, with just the right gravity, with a moon that helps to regulate all of this and just happens to be the exact right size to cover over the sun during a solar eclipse so that we can study the surface of the sun and ponder over our existence?
For that minute and 46 seconds.
For that minute and 46 seconds. I mean, God has done some incredible things. He has placed the entire universe around us for display so that we can study it and wonder in amazement at it.
That's awesome. And that's what, I mean, there's nothing wrong with asking these questions.
Oh, no.
I mean, we don't understand them. God knows, of course, He created it. But there's nothing wrong with asking these questions, with studying this. You know, there was a time where if you studied this and you were looked on that you were going against God's Word. But clearly, there is a way for science and religion to walk hand in hand.
Yes.
And for religion to prove science. You know, I mean, it's just, it's there. And I think that's awesome.
And we have a framework. See, we have a historical record of the creation of the universe, as well as key historical events: the flood, the Tower of Babel, many historical events that we can trace back. So we've got that historical record to go by. And if we use that as a framework and say, well, let's hypothesize, let's think of what science should be showing us if the Bible is correct.
Right.
And every time we're finding that the Bible is correct. I was just talking on the way down here. I called up a friend, Dr. Russell Humphreys, and he's on his way out to the conference tomorrow. But he is a physicist. And he actually started looking at Earth's magnetic field. We have a geomagnetic field around Earth. And the geomagnetic field is almost like a deflection shield for cosmic radiation or solar rays. Okay, very important. But what we also find is that when we study other planets, they sometimes have magnetic fields as well.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Okay. We had seen this when we looked through telescopes. We'd seen auroras, the aurora borealis, the northern and southern lights are caused by our magnetic field. So we had seen these sparkly lights around some of the planets, and we said, well, they must have magnetic fields. But what are the magnetic fields like? Dr. Russell Humphreys, a Bible-believing Christian, said, well, if the universe is only 6,000 years old, based on the way magnetic fields decay over time, and as a physicist, he's doing all that way over my head, but he's like, well, then this is the formula that we should use, and we should do this and this, and so we should expect that the magnetic fields, the strength of that around Uranus and Neptune should be this and that and the other, okay? So he plotted it all out. Well, NASA said, well, the universe is, solar system has been around for 4.5 billion years old. So if the decay rate and blah, blah, this is what we should expect. Well, they sent a probe. So this is predictive power, okay? Based on the biblical record, we can predict what the magnetic field should be around distant planets. NASA finally sent a probe. When the probe got there, guess whose calculations were spot on?
That's awesome.
I mean,
wow.
So it's not a blind faith. Yes, I have faith that what's written in there is always accurate, but it's not blind because it's vindicated by all of the new scientific discoveries.
Wow.
That's encouraging to me. I mean, I just love that. That's what I love to study. And so through astronomy and through the use of these big observatory class telescopes that our ministry employs in Tennessee, and we'll be getting some pictures of the eclipse as long as it's clear.
What will you, because it's a very short time. Of course, I mean, I guess that's when it's the total eclipse. I mean, it's going to be, it'll happen for a while, I guess, But what will you be looking for or doing? Because I think if I was you, my jaw would just be on the floor and I'd be like, what do I do? The moment's here, I don't know what to do. So are you just going to be taking it all in, or do you have a lot of work to do?
I got a lot of work to do. In those few minutes, you can capture two spectacular things. One's called Bailey's beads. And Bailey's beads is because of the rough structure of the moon. So the moon's got craters in it, just like this rock's got little pock marks in it, okay? And so what's called Bailey's beads is when the sun's rays shoot over the craters of the moon, and it causes this little sparkly effect right around the edge.
Wow.
That's right before it goes into totality. So I want to take a picture of that. All right. Then, as it goes into totality, then all of a sudden you get the diamond ring effect.
Okay.
And that's where all you can see is just this tiny thin outline of the sun's outer corona, but then this bright speck right there at one edge, where it's not quite going into totality. So those two are beautiful. If we can get pictures of both of those, but that means that you have to be taking a picture every few seconds because it happens so fast. So I'm going to try to find a clear area. I'm going to set up a telescope. I'm probably going to set up another tripod with a camera with a telephoto lens on. Everything has to be solar protected. Everything. I mean, you can destroy the equipment and destroy your eyes easily if you don't have that protection. But then I want to be able to enjoy it. So I might put an electronic timer, which automatically takes the photos for me. But I've got to make sure that it all goes off flawlessly because you miss it, you can be waiting a number of years.
Yes. So, but now eclipses, they happen more frequently than I guess the last one here in North America or around this area was in the 60s or 70s or something.
Right.
But they happen around the world more frequently. Is that correct?
They do. They do. Yeah. Lunar eclipses are several times a year.
Right.
A lot of times. Right. At least partials. But solar eclipses do happen. The last one that went through the center of North America was in 1979, I believe.
Okay.
If you travel over to Africa or over to Europe or up into, the far reaches of the north, you can capture them more often than that.
More frequent, yeah.
But most people don't have the ability to travel. It's coming to us.
It's coming to us.
It's coming right here. And that's what makes it so exciting.
Yeah.
And so instead of spending tens of thousands of dollars trying to get a plane and chase it down and then set up and hope it's clear and all of that, it's coming to us.
Have you had the opportunity to see one in person?
Never.
So this will be your first. That's awesome. Yeah. That's awesome.
I'm pumped.
Well, I bet, man. I bet. Well, what's your, God forbid, what's your contingency plan if it's raining or if it's cloudy?
I have a number of friends who are pilots.
Okay.
And they have access to some better weather reports than most general people do.
So you'll have a good heads up.
So I'll have hopefully a day's heads up. And if it's going to be cloudy, we're hoping and praying. But if it's going to be cloudy for any reason, I'll jump on the nearest interstate and track back the eclipse to a spot where I know it's going to be clear.
Well, now how's that work with all your equipment? Are you busting out the big telescope?
Not the big one, not the big 16-inch.
That
one's on the back of it.
On the back there, if I can zoom in. Huge. And if you watch the show on TBN, it's on the set.
It's on the set,
Yeah.
Right
there it is.
Right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a big 16-inch observatory class telescope.
Yeah.
It's fully automated. It weighs about 700-800 pounds, and it takes me hours to set that up if I have to move it because it goes through calibration procedures. I've got it equatorially mounted, so it finds level, it finds north. Then you calibrate it to 2 stars on opposite ends of the sky, and then it'll go to over 100,000 objects, galaxies, nebulous stars, with the push of a button. It has this motorized mount that slews to it and tracks it all night long.
Now, does it have software for the eclipse?
It does. You can download some of that.
Okay.
However, the sun is a pretty large target. So instead of taking that telescope, which is for more deep sky objects, I'm going to take a more mobile telescope, a triplet refractor, which is still big, but it's not as heavy. And so I'll be able to throw that in the back of a big pickup or something like that and go, set it up in the matter of 30 minutes or so. And that way I've got some sort of contingency in case it's cloudy. But it's going to be, I know. It's going to be so spectacular.
I know that burned Einstein one time. He was having what was that about? That's vaguely coming back to me. He had to have the eclipse to see something, and he sent somebody, It must have been in the First World War or something.
Yeah.
Somebody like Washington State to observe it for him to report back. And it was cloudy that day. And it's like, what? And it was years. I don't know if that's when he won his Nobel Prize or what, but it was years before he could observe something else or something. Anyway, that's ringing a bell. So, But anyway, let's get back to space. So you've been studying objects in space for, what, 10 years, more than that now?
10 years.
Yeah.
10 years.
What is the one thing that first, well, maybe what's two things? The one that's like blew your mind, and then what's the thing that continually blows your mind every time you look at it?
Well, let me grab that book, and I'm going to show a picture out of the book, because the first thing that blew my mind was when I took a picture of the Great Orion Nebula, and that was so spectacular that I couldn't believe the colors that were present. Okay, so let's see if we can zoom in on that. I don't know if there's a glare on it or not, but that right there started the ministry.
Wow.
And after I saw that for myself.
Now this is a photo you took?
I took that photo, yeah.
Awesome.
And I said, the heavens really do declare God's glory.
Wow.
The blues, the purples, the reds, all of that, you can analyze that and tell what types of gases the nebula is made out of. And after that, the more I began to study creation and astronomy, I realized just how vast the universe is. So let's see if I can break it down for you. We throw around the terms in astronomy: light years, parsecs, astronomical units, these complicated terms. Okay. Most people can't comprehend that light year is the distance light would travel at 12 million miles a minute after an entire year.
Right.
Most people can't comprehend or understand or fully fathom a parsec, which is merely the parallax of 1 second of arc.
Okay. Yeah, I got it now.
You get it now?
I know what that is now. That makes perfect sense. Yes.
So I was pondering that one day, and I said, man, why is it all so complicated? Why can't we figure out some way to break this down to people like me who don't have our PhDs? I've studied for years, yet I just still can't comprehend those. Do you know what miles an hour is?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm good there.
So NASA sent probes, the New Horizons and Voyager space probes. The Voyager space probes are currently on their way outside of our solar system as we speak.
That's awesome, yeah.
And they're traveling at around 40,000 miles per hour.
Wow.
That's pretty fast.
Yeah.
Now, I can understand that. I mean, that's faster than I'd like to go.
Yeah.
But 40,000 miles per hour, I can grasp that. So let's jump on that space probe and travel to our closest star. Well, our closest star is Proxima Centauri, and Proxima Centauri is about 4.2 light years away. Again, we're throwing out those technical terms, light years. 4 light years, that's not too far.
Yeah.
Traveling on our fastest space probe, 40,000 miles per hour, it would take us 70,000 years to reach our closest star.
What are we doing waiting around here? Let's go.
Jump on.
Yeah, we got places to go. 70,000 years.
70,000 to closest.
Wow.
Okay, so if you start backing that up and just tracking through the universe, that's in our galaxy, that's our closest star. You go out to some of the more farther away objects like that nebula. Well, you're talking, 15 million years at the speed of our fastest spacecraft. You go out to some of the more distant galaxies we can see, 500 billion years
It would take
to reach those distant galaxies, traveling at the speed of our fastest spacecraft.
Well, when you say 500 billion years, the Big Bang happened, and we're assuming a centrally located area. And how long ago did they say that was?
They say about 13.7 billion years.
So there's a lot of billions of years there, and that was if the universe is expanding beyond the speed of light.
Yes.
So how does science explain that?
Well, they have a problem there.
It sounds like it.
Because the Big Bang has a starlight and time problem, in that it's still the light from one side of the universe doesn't have time to reach the light to the other side of the universe. If the universe is 14 billion years, you'd have to give it a lot more time. All right?
Wow.
So they came up with this rescuing device that they call inflation. And inflation states that in the first few nanoseconds after the Big Bang, all of the matter in the universe must have expanded faster than the speed of light, magically.
Because that's, you can't...
There are problems with that. And then, magically, it slowed down.
Hit the brakes, huh? Boy.
And no explanation as to what caused it or what caused the slowdown. Now, let's back it up and look at history, because in 1912, I believe it was, a man by the name of Vesto Slipher, using the Lowell Observatory telescopes in Flagstaff, he was looking at distant galaxies, and he said, whoa, look at this. It looks like galaxies are flying away from us. So he noticed a red shift, a Doppler shift. Now, if you've got a train passing or a siren or something, there's a pitch change there.
Right.
Everybody's heard it. Same thing happens to light.
Okay.
There's a frequency change in the wavelength of the light when something's moving away from you as opposed to when it's moving towards you.
Oh, okay.
A shift towards the red if it's moving away. A shift towards the blue if it's coming towards you.
Okay.
So Vesto Slipher said in 1912, look, distant galaxies have a red shift. It's like the galaxies are flying away from us. Well, there was a Jesuit priest by the name of Georges Lemaitre in Belgium.
Say that 3 times.
Yeah, it took me a while to practice that one. Just a few years later. And he said, wait a second, Vesto. What if, instead of galaxies randomly flying away from us, what if the universe is stretching out? What if it's expanding? Okay, that would explain it, because then some of those distant galaxies would have this red shift as they got farther away from us.
Right.
He said, that could explain it. But what if we tracked it back in time and tried to put it all together? So he took it one step too far. He says, well, it looks like the universe is stretching out. What if we tracked it back and put it all together into a tiny little spot, or to a point, and to a singularity billions of years ago? And he called that the cosmic egg. Okay, so he took it too far, because you can't have it in a single speck. There's way too many problems. Inflation's one problem. All right, let's read in the scripture. About a dozen times, you're going to read references scattered throughout the Bible to a stretching of the heavens. God stretches out the heavens like a curtain. He spreads out the curtains like a tent. He stretches out the heavens. What is that referring to? Could it be referring to the spreading, to the expansion of the universe that we see through telescopes? To this redshift that we see? It could be. So the Bible, again, in this instance, appears to have predicted a spreading out of the heavens.
Wow.
Now, Einstein, he looked at the heavens as sort of like this space-time continuum, basically like a fabric of space, and the fabric is being stretched out. And you've got all the galaxies sitting on the fabric and the planets and all of that. And as you stretch the fabric, well, it affects not only time, it affects space, it gives you that redshift, it gives you the expanding universe. It explains a lot. It's biblical. A stretching of the heavens is biblical. We can't put it all back together again. That's not biblical, and it's not observable, and it's not repeatable. And it's
even
not
if we
science.
would, I don't think we could live through that too well. That would hurt.
So, but again, when I look and I just see that something viewed in 1912 is just now being understood and fully understood, and it's all pointing us back to God's glory.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, let's talk about, we hadn't talked about much of your books yet. We've alluded to them. Your latest book, Bible Knows Best.
Yes.
Hot off the press.
Hot off the press.
Tell us about it. Of course, we've been talking about it. Is that the creature you were talking? Is that his tooth?
Yep,
okay.
Yep. That's the tooth from one of those.
The tooth, right here. Boom.
Yep.
Right there.
That is a mosasaur. It's a type of a tylosaur. And again, I have found portions of those creatures in the field in the middle of Kansas, in the middle of nowhere, and they grew up to 50 to 60 feet long.
That's wild.
Giant marine predator sea creatures. They're technically not called dinosaurs because dinosaurs are land-dwelling animals. These would have been a prehistoric dinosaur type creature, but they're sea sea dragons.
Okay.
And so that book goes into mosasaurs. It goes into the rock layers the little experiments we did.
Hummingbird.
It goes into the hummingbird. It goes into a lot of what we talked about.
There's the rock layers. There's
the bent layers.
I should have looked at that earlier.
Yep. I don't know if you can zoom in. There you go.
Yeah.
So you can see those bent layers. And many of them are bent so smoothly that they didn't fracture.
Now that's not smooth.
That's not smooth right there. Yeah. No, that's pretty rough.
Anyway.
So Bible Knows Best, the book and DVD, brand new documentary. It's been endorsed by Ray Comfort of Living Waters. It has been endorsed by the president of the Alabama Baptist Children's Homes, and they say that book and DVD combo is going to be a great witnessing tool that people can use.
Definitely.
Just released to get this information out. If you've got a skeptic, well, give them a copy. Give them a copy of the book. It's a short 50-page book.
Right.
It's something
It's very small. Yeah. They can read this in an hour.
Absorb.
Yeah.
And it just gives you snippets, 20 scriptural verses of scientific accuracy that tells us from the beginning the Bible is inspired. The reason we know it's inspired is because the writers of the Bible were not scientists. They would not have known that there were springs in the sea. They would not have known that there were paths in the sea. They would not have known that the heavens were stretching out. They wouldn't have been able to observe any of this.
Right.
But they were inspired by our Creator to write what they did, and they wrote down all of these scientific events.
Wow.
So that's what we look at in the book and DVD set.
And then this one's cool, Echoes of Jurassic. And so this is hosted by you. Who else is on this DVD here?
Dr. Kevin Anderson, who...
How do y'all go to dig sites in this DVD?
We do. We go to paleontological digs, and we look at where that dinosaur bone, that horn, was found. Then we take it back into the lab, and we show just what was found. We show pictures from a scanning electron microscope of the osteocytes and some of the cells and the structure that are still there.
Wow.
That shouldn't be there.
Right.
Unless this thing was buried in the flood. And so that is about an hour DVD documentary called Echoes of the Jurassic with on-location footage and interviews from top scientists, friends of mine, and it's put out by the Creation Research Society, who's, again, having an event right here this week. So.
Yes, and again, we're taping
it's dated,
it, but this is why we're taping it, folks. Is David was in town for Bob Jones for this convention, and so I was like, we got to get you in the studio. So I wish I remember the air date on this, but the people at home watching right now, they'll know the air date because this will be they'll be watching it. They can look at the calendar and say, this was the air date, Dante. So,
but regardless, you've missed the conference, but you can go check out our websites and go check out and subscribe to our newsletters.
August 7th. Is that right? Well, then good, because that's just a couple weeks now. Okay. And the eclipse hasn't happened.
That's exactly
so, folks. Right. Take all that in. I'm glad people are at home right now laughing and saying, "How they missed it? It rained or something." So.
And being it hasn't happened yet, if you go to our website, davidreeves.com/solar eclipse. I'm putting up a video clip in the next few days. It'll be up by August 7th.
Excellent.
A video clip that shows you how to observe it, what to expect, what you're going to see.
Good. I need to watch that.
With maps of exactly where to go to see full totality and all details.
Excellent.
So check that out. Sign up for our newsletter there.
Excellent. Now this one is a little bit old, but it's still good. I was sharing with you, we were in my office before we started taping. I had a gentleman in here that studied the tabernacle.
Yes.
And man, he broke it down. We sat here for probably as long as we've been sitting here today talking about the tabernacle, and it was so fascinating. So tell us about Wonders Without Numbers.
Wonders Without Number is a video series. Prophetic Patterns in the Tabernacle is that particular DVD.
Yeah.
And so we look at how, on that one, how the human body, when overlaid over an overhead view of the tabernacle actually fits with some of the rooms and the areas of the tabernacle. A human heart almost fits with the Holy of Holies, where the Ark of the Covenant dwelt, where God's presence dwelt. So there's a lot of patterns there. Cool. But Wonders is a series of DVDs and TV programs that, Dante, you're so gracious to air on the network. Yeah, we're going to get them back on for
sure. You took a little break, and y'all are starting to record some more now. Yep. So, and they can find all this stuff on the website. But how many of these do you have right now?
We have around 35 right now.
Wow, okay.
And soon to be 85.
Golly, you are a busy man. Well, let me tell you, when I first met you, I think it was right before y'all got started with TBN. Y'all were doing the little things on YouTube out of your home.
Yes.
And now you've got a big building where you're handling all your your studio stuff and your fulfillments of orders and stuff. And I was talking to you a couple months ago, and y'all have shipped thousands of DVDs all across the world.
Yes.
I mean, the other day you tell me, how many did you ship to Australia? It was like 2,000 or something like that?
About 900 or 1,000 to Australia on one thing.
On one order. Yeah. It's like, wow. So folks, y'all need to get in, everybody in the Christian scientific community.
Yes.
And you bring in the best of the best. If you don't know it, you find out. And if they don't know it, then it's not there to be known. So,
isn't that what the Bible says? It says, prove all things and hold fast that which is good. And so it's not like we're supposed to, we can question things and we can say, well, how does this work? Does this fit with the biblical time frame? Does this fit with what the Bible tells us? And so we don't just stop and just say, okay, I do have faith that what I read in the Bible is accurate. But all of the scientists, these PhDs who are great friends of mine, I talk to them on a regular basis, and we talk about breaking news in the scientific community. And I always like to, ask one question. I say, okay, you've got a PhD in astronomy, you've got a PhD in genetics, you've got a PhD in this or in paleontology. What do you see? What are you finding? What's the most recent research? And the answer is usually the same. It's, David, everything we're finding in the scientific community is pointing back to amazing complexity and design that could not have happened by chance, no matter how many billions of years you give it. And so it had to have had a creator. Who is that creator? Now, a lot of people look at intelligent design. They'll say, well, it's intelligently designed. Everything around us appears to be intelligent. We appear to be intelligently designed. So who was the designer? It must have been aliens. And so there's a lot of different ways you can go with that. But we don't stop right there. We say, we know the designer. I know him personally.
Exactly.
It's Jesus Christ. Because we go back to John, and it says, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. So Jesus Christ was in the beginning creating all things. He was there creating these things. So we actually can have a personal relationship with the Creator of the universe. And if people don't, I would encourage them that He's out there waiting for you.
Exactly. That's why we do this, David. I mean, people look at this and they say, oh, that's neat. It's just the guy with a telescope and it's cool and he's learning. But we're doing this because there are people out there that are lost, that do not know of Christ, who do not know our Creator, and like we do. And we're doing this because we know they need that.
That's right.
You've got to have that. I have to have that. David had to have that.
Yes.
We all need that. And that is just what blows my mind every time I think like this, is the Creator of everything, known and unknown, chose David to serve Him. I'm like, I mean, he's got to know what he's doing, but sometimes I'm like, really? Really me? But
not qualified.
It's amazing. I mean, and not only that, then he became a man.
Right.
Suffered and died because he loves us.
And think about we looked at the universe, just how grand it was, just how far away those galaxies are. Well, think about that. There are billions and trillions and trillions and trillions of stars out there, and this little Earth floating on space, a tiny little ball. And God sent His Son, Jesus Christ, right here.
It's amazing.
He cares about us.
Yeah.
He cares so much about us that He died for us.
That's
and He
amazing.
rose again.
It's amazing. And He even referred to us as His greatest or His favorite creation.
That's right.
Really? I mean, when you
Made in His image.
Made in His image. I mean, you look at these pictures that you've taken in this book, and these things are gorgeous. And then you're staring at me right now. I mean, really? He loves us, man. That's
Yes,
phenomenal.
He does.
That's phenomenal. So, but last book, Wonders Without Numbers. I guess, was this your first book?
That was my first book, and it's based off of a passage in Job. Job was going through a rough time. We go through rough times. We go through really rough patches, and
He had it pretty hard.
He had it pretty hard. All we have to do is read Job, and we're like, well, we got it bad, but we don't have it as bad as he did. He remained faithful through it all.
Amazing.
And there's a passage in the book of Job that says that God does great things past finding out and wonders without number.
Wow.
And so while there are some things that are past finding out, we'll never know, we'll never understand some things in the scientific world, some things around us until we get to heaven, I don't think. But yeah, there are some things we don't know, but He's done great wonders without number that we can study and that we can give Him glory for.
Exactly.
And so often we brush it aside and we say, oh, just give it enough time, and that can happen by accident over millions of years. Billions of random mutations can create something as intricate as the human body. And so we can give Him the glory for His wonders because He's placed them all around us.
Exactly. It's amazing. And, you know, we'll never know. And I don't think the human mind can comprehend everything, you know. And so even if we did understand the natural completely, we never will, there's still the supernatural that we definitely can't comprehend. But, you know, thinking about that, it goes back to the atheist and the scientists that believe in evolution and the Big Bang and everything. And they swear by it. And what's scary, though, is that they'll admit that they don't know everything.
Sure.
And in that that lack of knowledge, they would admit that there could be a God.
Right.
And that is terrifying when you think about that, because they're sitting pretty much on the edge of hell, on the edge of an eternity without God, which is the greatest discovery, in my opinion. I mean, you can stare down that telescope all you want, but when you see God face to face, that's amazing.
It is.
That's amazing. And that's just scary. And that's why we do these things. I know that's why you do it. And all these scientists, y'all put in the research and the effort, and you share it with people that's lost.
Yep.
You want them to find Christ.
We do.
And that's awesome.
We sincerely do. And we think that it's just amazing, an amazing witness when you study creation and you find the Creator as a result. His evidence is abundantly clear. We're without excuse, like Romans says. And you just mentioned it a minute ago. If you were to ask the most brilliant person in the world, he would honestly have to tell you that he doesn't know a fraction of all there is to know. A fraction of 1%. But even if he knew 1% of all there was to know about science and the natural world,
99% out there.
there's 99% out there.
Exactly.
And so he has to admit that God could exist in that 99% that he doesn't know. And so there are no true atheists. Because the evidence is abundantly clear that something created us, and it's innate inside of us. We instinctively know that somehow.
Right.
We just try to suppress it sometimes.
Right.
And we try to say, well, we want to make our own rules and regulations. We want to decide for ourselves what's right and wrong. And the only way we can do that is to elevate ourselves to the position of authority, ourselves as a God.
Right.
And so we try to replace God, and we try to put Him out and say, well, He doesn't exist, and all of this is mere chance. But it doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work. There will come a day when every knee will bow, every tongue will confess. And we want people to know and accept before that day comes.
Exactly. David, I want to thank you so much for being here, brother.
Yes, sir.
This has been amazing. And check out the website, Give us that real quick.
DavidRives.com, DavidRives.com.
And definitely subscribe to the newsletter or the email letter, because it's like, I get on some of these subscriptions. I'm like, why did I join this? Every time I get one, it's amazing. Like the newest one, Monkeys Don't Cry.
Monkeys Don't Cry.
I love it. David, I want to thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Dante.
I hope y'all had a lot of a good time tonight, learned a lot. Again, check out his website for a lot of more information. We couldn't fit it all in an hour and a half, that is for sure. But thank you so much for watching Nite Line. We'll see you tomorrow night.
Hello, I'm Wade Hall.
I'm Gwen Hall.
I'm Bill Kreitzer.
And I'm Ann Kreitzer.
A few months ago, the Lord laid on our hearts during the program to have a healing service.
It's a time where we'll open up with worship and some old songs.
And we'll have time of teaching.
A time of testimony and prayer.
Come and be with us, and be sure, if you're sick and need prayer, join us.
The local churches are inviting you. Just listen to this week's Church Spotlight. Mountain View Church of God of Prophecy in Campobello will have the Tony Edwards Trio in a love offering concert Sunday, August 20th at 6 p.m. For more information, call 864-351-9466.